One of the most talked about elements of parkour is this feeling of overcoming a challenge, whether it's a new flip or the perfect stick. This drive to complete challenges is one of parkour's biggest motivators. With these challenges, there are countless ways to overcome them, but in this video I want to talk about two opposing ideas that sort of sit on opposite ends of the spectrum. On the one hand, we have progressions, breaking a challenge into smaller pieces that are more manageable. And we do this all the time, and it makes sense. We learn to walk before we can run. We don't just send corks on concrete without any training. However, there are issues with all of these progressions, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in this video. So the other end of the spectrum is trying not to break down the challenge at all, and keeping it as it is. The goal is to be in tune with your ability and to know that you can complete this challenge safely. And this is also really common in parkour, especially for something that's within our physical limit but mentally is more challenging. Sometimes it almost feels like a failure if you have to drop the difficulty and try something easier before you attempt the full challenge. The end result feels much less satisfying knowing you had to tailor the challenge to your own weaknesses. The exchange between these two ideas is what I want to talk about in this video. So why is it for some challenges we use everything around us to help us, and on other times we're so focused on that one goal that we don't want to change it? Well, I think it really depends on what the goal of the situation is, and we can take two common phrases in parkour and see the differences that they create. These two phrases are pretty similar and are both focused on improving your skills and developing, but one of them is a process goal and the other is an outcome goal. This is what I want to talk about in this video. Goals can be split up into so many different ways, but for this video I'm just going to keep it simple with a process goal and an outcome goal. So what is an outcome goal? Well, using the example of learning a backflip, the goal is just to do a backflip. The way we learn it doesn't matter, whether we use sand, whether we use a spotter, mats, whether we land on our head countless times, which is what I did, is irrelevant. It's about doing that skill. So what is a process goal in parkour? With our example above, the goal is just to work on a particular trait or process. The actual movement we do isn't necessarily relevant. It's just a way of creating the environment for a particular process. So working on my commitment, I'm going to be seeking out challenges that are outside of my comfort zone, that are challenging. But I haven't gone into the session looking for that particular challenge. It's more about finding things that will create the environment for growth. By finding a really hard challenge and breaking it up into 100 pieces, you're not working on your commitment. You've not created the environment to work on that process. It's about trusting our past experience and knowing that we can overcome this challenge as it is. So linking this back to our earlier question of why it sometimes feels like a failure to break something down, or maybe whilst completing that challenge is important to you, the way you complete it is equally important, and this is something you've just not recognised in the moment. It's not just about getting it and moving on, but also equally importantly getting it in the way that you want and targeting the process that you want. In these instances, it's common to walk away from the challenge completely and come back at a later date, even when we know if we broke it down we could complete it. That's not what we're looking for. We'd rather come back, work on our skill set in other areas, and then complete the challenge as it is at a later date. This shouldn't be seen as a failure. It's being aware that coming back at a later date will be more beneficial to you than completing the challenge now and sacrificing the process you're after. This balancing act is very individual and depends on so many factors around that person and the environment and who they're with and even what movement it is as well.
Yeah. Oh. Yes.
Both types of goals have their limitations. If we just focused on outcome goals, we might overcome all these challenges and complete all these challenges, but if we're always using mats and equipment and progressions, when we don't have access to those, we don't have the mental attributes to overcome that challenge as it is. If you're always using an outcome goal and you're doing whatever you need to get that, you're not going to be working on the mental attributes that you need in other situations. An example for me where my mental ability has really lagged behind my physical ability is palm flips. I learnt them with 2 spotters, mats, in a gym, and in doing so the learning process took about 10 minutes. It was really easy to learn compared to learning a backflip when I was by myself. Because I'd used so many progressions, every single palm flip since, I've needed a spotter for the first go. By breaking the challenge down so much, I didn't work on the commitment skill when I was learning it. So there's an imbalance between what my physical ability is and what I can commit to. Had the initial experience of learning the palm flip actually been harder, it might be easier to keep the skill for longer. There is no right or wrong. It's okay to use mats and okay to not use mats. What is important is that each individual chooses the best progressions for them in that moment, whether it's mats or progressions or committing to the challenge fully. There's 1,000 ways to learn a backflip and 1,000 ways to commit to a running pre. Fear management also plays a large part in this. Overcoming fear builds our sense of accomplishment and fulfillment. From my experience training, usually overcoming a mental challenge is much more rewarding than a physical challenge. So what does this all mean practically? Every person knows what they want from any given movement. And I think the instances where we get frustrated with ourselves is when we don't. Maybe we should try and assess where we are in this continuum and see how it's benefiting or hindering us. With most things in life, too much of anything can be bad. In myself, I know I rely too heavily on breaking things down. This has been worsened by injuries and this feeling of angst that I'm gonna hurt myself more. If you've suffered a long-term injury and struggle with committing to challenges as they are, maybe that's something for you to work on too. A mix of physical and mental progression leads to the most fulfillment. Keeping track of how you break down a challenge might give little insights that can be beneficial. Everyone is motivated by different things, but often a lot of the frustration in training is avoidable by just focusing on what it is we're hoping to gain. I hope you've enjoyed this video and drop me a comment for any suggestions for future videos. Thank you for watching.